Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. 1980, the dawn of a new decade. Special decade for me. That was really my growing up decade. I was born in the early 70s. And so it was the 80s where I really kind of discovered music, for real. I'm a big fan of 80s, unapologetic, big fan of a lot of 80s music. But of course, I also went back and discovered my love for the 60s stuff and the 70s stuff, that we've been talking about on this channel too. I love it all, love it all. What's going on in 1980? Well, Ronald Reagan will win his presidential election in 1980. And, Reagan really sort of one of the faces of the whole decade, right? Just as importantly, though, the Rubik's Cube debuts, as does Pac-Man, as does CNN on cable. A lot of debuts. The Mariel boat lift from Cuba, where Fidel Castro basically emptied out his jails and put his most dangerous criminals on boats and sent them to Florida, which of course is the premise of the film Scarface, right? Mount St. Helens erupts in 1980. That was a big deal. I actually vaguely remember that happening. Kramer versus Kramer wins Best Picture that year. But of course, the big event, very sad event, tragedy. John Lennon is murdered in December of 1980. All right, well, let's talk about what's coming out musically. What's happening here? Great year. We had some great years coming, in the late 70s. I think it just continues here. So I got my top 10, hit you with some honorable mentions. In my 10 slot, I have the debut album from the Psychedelic Furs. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really that kind of raspy, unique voice from Richard Butler. And I've got, I think I have all of at least their kind of classic era albums. This one's a bit moodier, which I like. I think it really fits his voice, opening with India and then going into Sister Europe. It's got a really, really unique sound, I think. Coming in at number 9. Now, number 9 is a guy I really admire, always have. And I love The Who. We've done a Who video way back when, featured their records on a lot of lists. But I think it's 1980 where Pete Townsend really steps out. I know he had released a few records before then. But for me, Empty Glass is his first great solo record. I love this album. Empty Glass is fantastic from Pete Townsend. Um, I've always said, you look at those early 80s Who records, Face Dances, It's Hard, which have some great songs, but overall they're not real strong albums. And then you look at a lot of, Pete Townsend's solo records that he was sort of simultaneously putting out the same, time period. You can see where he's sort of saving his better songs. he's he's really looking at his solo career, at least in my view. Oops, just kicked the camera there. Um, I've always said you could have had some just awesome Who records in the early 80s if he had picked his, best songs that were on those records and saved the best songs from the solo stuff and just totally focused on the Who material. Man, those would have been some killer Who records. Anyway, this is great though. Rough Boys, awesome opener. Let My Love Open the Door. Probably his biggest solo hit, I think. Imagine. What else? A Little Is Enough is great. The title track, Empty Glass, is awesome. Real underrated song. Great album cover too. I just love this. I love that album cover. Anyway, Townsend's starting a little solo streak here. From here and kind of into the mid '80s, he's got a series of really good solo records. Starts here for me. All right, number 8, one of my favorites. You've watched this channel enough, I love this guy. This album, I think, probably generally ranks higher for a lot of people than it does me in this guy's discography. 8's pretty low for me for this guy. in any given year. But I do have Bruce Springsteen's The River, his double album. A lot of people love this record. I really like it. I think there is a single awesome classic album in there, but I also think there's some filler. I think it's a little bloated. I think he could have trimmed it down if he had picked the right songs. Now I have, because I didn't pull it out, but I have that box set, The Ties That Bind, which is like all the River sessions, and it does include an early single album version that he was thinking about putting out. It's not very good. He just didn't pick the right songs, but yeah, I think you do have a great single record here. Anyway, that's just my view on that. I know a lot of people really dig The River. Number 7, did a video on these guys a while back. This is a record that is often kind of dismissed, I think, in their catalog, but I have grown to really appreciate it a lot more in recent year, really. That's the Cars, Panorama. I think they're, at least out of their classic run of those first 5 records, they're least accessible, most experimental. I'm really kind of digging it though, lately. So there you go. Number 6, did a video on these guys too. Love this band. When I did that video, well, no, actually, I think it was the first year where the year of their debut. I told you guys you're gonna see like every one of their records, in these years to come. They only put out 5 records though. Talking about the Police, got Zenyatta Mandata, the middle record in their 5 record run. As I said in that video when I was talking about this record, it's probably their most spare record. Yeah, it's like really use of space, kind of sparse, um, really interesting. Of course, it's got "Don't Stand So Close to Me," a huge hit, classic song. "Driven to Tears" rocks. One of the longest song titles, right? "When the world is running down, you make the best of what's still around." It's a great song. Yeah, it actually, like quite a few Police records. It sort of peters out near the end, but man, what is strong on here is really, really strong. And I do love the Police, as you could tell for that video I made. Number 5. Now, number 5 is a real interesting record. Number 5 is from Steve Winwood, "Arc of a Diver." Now, if you look at Winwood post Traffic, kind of after that classic period, his solo career has been up and down. It's been spotty. He has some fantastic records, and he's got some real forgettable records, and I'm going to say he's got some just plain trash. I mean, I love the guy, admire him immensely, but his solo career has been real up and down. This is a near masterpiece, I think. I got it at number 5 here. What's cool is this is what this. I guess McCartney was doing it a bit in the '70s, but not a lot of people. A lot of people do it now because it's easier with technology. But this really was a Steve Winwood record. He, from what I understand, he plays every instrument. I mean, it was really basically just him sort of building the tracks. Yeah, man, it's just awesome. While You See a Chance, great pop single. "Arc of a Diver," that song is so fantastic. "Spanish Dancer's" got this great groove. He's experimenting with synthesizers, but it's still real, I don't know, tasteful, and he's got some great guitar on there. Winwood's always an underrated guitar player. This "Arc of a Diver," I think, is fantastic. All right, coming in at number 4 is a debut album. I think made pretty big splash here. I'm impressed with it. It's a debut record from U2, Boy. I mean, just straight out of the gate. Uh, U2 just, I think, comes with a pretty unique sound. That underrated rhythm section of Adam Clayton, Larry Mullen Jr. is already intact. Edge, with his sort of architecture. I don't know how to describe his guitar work here. Not as many effects as he would employ later, but uses a lot of kind of arpeggios and really, I don't know. I guess I do describe it kind of like architecture, like a structure of a building. You know, not a lot of direct solos, but just I mean, already sort of this unique guitar player. Bono, I think, is still sort of finding his voice here, but I mean, this is, it's a, I mean, a strong collection of songs for a debut. For these guys were, I don't know how old they were, in their late teens when they did this. Pretty remarkable. They just obviously get better from there, but um, I don't know. This is a really really good record. I think hell of a debut. All right, getting to my top three here. In my three slot is a record that's got real mixed, you know, uh, reactions from people. I don't know. You just watch other YouTube channels. I watch a lot of other guys, and there's some people who love this record. There's some people who really don't like this record. Critics love it. I love it. But I mean, there's a number of people who don't. Talking about Talking Heads, Remain in Light. If you don't like Brian Eno, you probably don't like this record because Eno produces it, but he does a lot more than produce it. This is basically the Eno David Byrne show, and the other members of the band kind of talked about that. That it's just Eno and Byrne, just the two of those guys were sort of joined at the hip at this point, and really it was kind of their project. You've got some killer guitar on here. Um, from Adrian Belew, and I mean, you cannot underestimate that. Yeah, a lot of these songs here, I mean, they're basically grooves, just really kind of thick, complex grooves. It's a lot of parts weaving in and out. A lot of them aren't real kind of traditional song structures. I mean, the one that stands out for a lot of people is "Once in a Lifetime." Which is great here. I tend to prefer the "Stop Making Sense" version of that song, but yeah, man, it's just awesome, just awesome. Unique record, I think, and again, just bringing in all these grooves and kind of world music influences. I think is brilliant, but an acquired taste, I guess. I do see how there are a lot of people who don't really dig it. My number two slot. This is a classic for me. God, I just hit the camera. This is a classic for me. Dire Straits, Making Movies. Well, it's the same thing on the back. Not the most inspired album art, I don't think. But anyway, Dire Straits, Making Movies. Uh, well, yeah. Well, if you haven't watched my Dire Straits video, I don't want to give away where I put this in the rankings, but I do love this record. Amongst fans, it's almost universally the favorite. That it's got one of those perfect sides. Side one is perfect. Again, I keep saying that, but I keep wanting to do a video on perfect album sides. Side one, it's three songs, but the epic Tunnel of Love, maybe their pinnacle, maybe their best song. The Romeo and Juliet, that classic love song. God, I love those lyrics in that song. And Skate Away, which is got a great groove to it, great drums in there. Just those three tracks on side one. Now, I do admit side two falls a little bit. Less Boys, definitely the weak link. Solid Rock's good. Oh, Solid Rock rocks. Hand in Hands, so. Espresso Love's real strong. So yeah, not as strong as the first side, but no, this is classic stuff. This is Knopfler really takes a step forward, I think, in his songwriting. I mean, just the epic song structure of something like Tunnel of Love is just awesome. And they would take these songs like Tunnel of Love and Romeo and Juliet, Espresso Love, Solid Rock, became concert staples. Really stretch them out live too. But yeah, awesome. But my number one for 1980, I think, undeniable masterpiece, groundbreaking, experimental, but not experimental just for experimental's sake. Still really good songs as well. I just genius. Have I gushed enough? Peter Gabriel, Peter Gabriel, Peter Gabriel, the third one, or Peter Gabriel 3, or Melt, whatever you want to call it, right? The official title, this is the third record in a row that he has titled Peter Gabriel. Um, I don't know if I told this story on one of the previous Gabriel albums or not, but this first run of albums, he just titled Peter Gabriel, and he wanted them just to be identified by their album art, and the way he described it one time, this really struck with me, is like, he kind of viewed them as issues of a magazine, you know, Rolling Stone magazine or Vogue or whatever, and you can tell the issue by a different cover for the magazine. He said, yeah, these records are just sort of like issues of the same magazine. Yeah, that's kind of interesting concept. As you probably know, very soon after this, a record company, that was Geffen, finally put their foot down and said, no, you got to start putting titles on these records. So you got so a little bit later. But anyway, to this. I mean, I can't say how brilliant it is. There's some debate over who invented the gated drum. This record was definitely a pioneer in gated drum. Phil Collins, of course, has a huge part in that because he plays drums on this. Um, some give credit to David Bowie for kind of inventing the gated drum sound, which is this sort of real I mean, compressed is the word, but not. There's not a lot of like cymbals or hi hat or anything like that. In fact, it was kind of interesting. Gabriel told his drummers, his percussionists here, like, you're not allowed to use cymbals or hi hat. Now listen to this record; they're not on here. It's kind of interesting, right? Gabriel liked to play those kind of games. Well, put these interesting restrictions on his musicians to where they would kind of then have to stretch a bit. And really fascinating textures on here. Aside from all that, this is just an amazing batch of songs. Maybe his strongest batch of songs that he wrote for a record. I mean, start to finish, man. Intruder, creepy as hell. I love that. No self control. Little instrumental interlude start, and then I don't remember. Just amazing bass from. I assume that's Tony Levin. Tony Levin plays bass on most everything of Gabriel's. Family Snapshot. Kind of interesting. I mean, kind of tell a song written from Lee Harvey Oswald's perspective, and Through the Wire, and then Games Without Frontiers, awesome single. Not One of Us, which I think he would really take to a next level live. I think Lead a Normal Life is the only one that to me is kind of forgettable on here. It's not bad. It's just doesn't stand. But then closing with the Majesty of Biko. I mean, just yeah. I mean, if you want to understand the genius of Peter Gabriel, here it is. All right, let's go through some honorable mentions real quick. I made a mistake on one of these previous videos when I didn't mention Joy Division's debut, but I am going to mention Joy Division's Closer here, obviously. We got to mention that in the honorable mentions. What else we got here? We have, I think, kind of the end of David Bowie's amazing run, that started, in the early 70s. Kind of, I mean, he makes some great records after this. I actually, well, you'll see. I love Let's Dance. Love Let's Dance. But Scary Monsters really does, I think, sort of closes the door on that whole era. And it's kind of interesting because, a lot of these songs on here, uh, they sort of echo back to some of the different, sounds that he was exploring throughout the 70s. And you've got a killer Robert Fripp solo on Teenage Wildlife. Man, that's awesome. Another record that sort of closes the door on an era for this band, Steely Dan's Gaucho, which I've grown to actually really appreciate more recently. This one, this comes after Asia, obviously, and Asia is so beloved by so many people, and so a lot of people kind of look at this as sort of a coda, kind of an afterthought. But No, man, I think this is pretty damn strong. In its own right. Devo puts out their third record, and I believe their most successful commercial record because it's got Whip It on there. But Freedom of Choice, other than that opening track of Girl You Want, which is awesome, they really do start to move away from guitars and lean heavily on synthesizers. And I don't know, kind of lose something that they had on those first two records. When they start to go more and more towards synthesizers. Whip It's a great single, though. I mean, can't deny that. Jeff Beck puts out, what is this? Oh, yeah, There and Back. I always forget the title of this because it just says Jeff Beck on there. Oh, no, there it is. There and Back. Another all instrumental, just killer record. I mean, I don't know. Most Jeff Beck, if he's just playing, it's awesome and it's interesting. A lot more synthesizers on this one, though. Definitely kind of getting into the '80s sound a bit more. The Pump is on here. That's probably the best known song on here. But a lot of these songs, he keep forgetting to talk about him in the past tense. I still can't believe he's gone. But in recent years, he was reviving a lot of these tracks. I've got some live stuff where he plays Star Cycle and You Never Know and The Pump, Space Boogie. So worth revisiting because this one isn't as talked about as much as some of the other ones. All right, Genesis. I'm a big Genesis fan. We got Genesis Duke. Where I think it's here. There's still some prog elements here. You got Duke's Travels, Duke's End. That stuff on the second side, but they're really start to make that transition to more of kind of a more a tighter kind of pop band. You got Behind the Lines, Duchess, Misunderstanding. I mean, Misunderstand that that's the new Phil Collins sound. Misunderstanding could have been on one of his solo records, easy. Turn It On Again. Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. I'm one of those people that I love Genesis progressive rock, but I'm also a fan of the pop. So yeah, I like Genesis. The Cure, 17 Seconds, where they really kind of get into I think this is the first real sort of Cure, just goth rock record. I mean, what do At Night, 17 Seconds, The Final Sound, this is dark stuff. But even here, Robert Smith's brilliant pop songs, A Forest, Play for a Day, Play for Today. Yeah, still on there. All right, real quick, I'm gonna wrap this up. A couple more here. Van Halen, the third one, Women and Children First. Just continuing, just great stuff from those first two records. Still having a lot of fun. Yeah. And you got to mention AC/DC, Back in Black. I mean, one of the great, I think, triumphant stories, comebacks in rock and roll, because obviously they had lost their front man. Bon Scott had died. And, how do you replace him? Well, Brian Johnson does a good job. I mean, never trying to overshadow Bon Scott's legacy, just doing his own thing. And it helps that they come back with just an amazing set of songs. Back in Black, Hell's Bells, Shoot the Thrill. Of course, You Shook Me All Night Long's on there, way overplayed, but yeah, it's a great rock song. Anyway, there you go. Actually, I mentioned a few that I don't have physical copies of here, but I do love. You got to talk about Rush, Permanent Waves. Um, I really like Rush's '80s sound. I putting more of those synths in there. I think their '80s stuff is great. Motorhead's Ace of Spades. Yeah, just can't deny that, man. And Judas Priest, British Steel. It's awesome too. That's some heavier stuff for you there. Anyway, there you go. It's my list for 1980. What do you got? In the comments, go ahead and what did I leave out? What did I get wrong? What did I get right? Whatever. Let's talk in the comments. Anyway, we really do appreciate you guys watching. We've been having a great time with the channel growing, kind of slow but steady, but it's always been growing, so we appreciate it. Thank you to all you guys who have subscribed so far. If you haven't, please do. It's how we grow. We really appreciate it. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Hit the bell for notifications so you can see when we put out new product. And what's the other one? Like the videos. Yeah, that's what I'm supposed to say. Like the videos if you like them. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.